Welcome back once more. This is Inside Politics here on KTN News. Now let's switch our attention to some geopolitical disputes, and the maritime dispute between Kenya and Somalia has taken a political turn after Majority Leader in the National Assembly, Aden Duale, did sponsor a motion in the House seeking, among other measures, deployment of Kenya Defence Forces to guard the contentious territory in the Indian Ocean. And as our political reporter Maritime now tells us, this move comes just weeks before the International Court of Justice begins hearing a case filed by Somalia at The Hague over the standoff.
This 62,000 square miles triangular maritime space off the coast of East Africa could casually be dismissed as just a drop in the vast Indian Ocean. But certainly not to Kenya and Somalia, who are locked in a bitter diplomatic row. There is already before the International Court of Justice at The Hague, with the case hearing slated for the 9th of next month. But before then, Majority Leader in the National Assembly, Aden Duale, in a motion co-authored with his minority counterpart, John Mbadi, has petitioned Parliament to sanction, among other measures, deployment of the Kenya Defence Forces to guard the contentious maritime space.
Kenya has budgeted for Somalia to be peaceful, and therefore Somalia needs to look at the bigger picture and the brotherhood between Somalia and Kenya, and not just the gold or the maritime boundary that they are trying to dispute. And when you look at the colonial records, the maritime dispute is on the Kenyan side.
We have solved conflict with Somalia from time immemorial, using both diplomatic and good relationship. But the idea of going to court may not be augur well for both nations, Kenya and Somalia.
Duale has listed this as the last of his 5 recommendations, other options being to engage diplomatically with the federal government of Somalia through available mechanisms under the African Union, the Intergovernmental Authority for Development IGAD, and the East African Community. Duale also wants Kenya to express to the United Nations its protest against the assertion of jurisdiction by the International Court of Justice over the maritime dispute. In February 2017, Kenya lost an application seeking to bar the court from hearing the case, a bitter dispute that hit a fever pitch earlier this year when Kenya accused Somalia of auctioning oil blocks within the contentious section, a move that saw Kenya order Somali ambassador to Kenya to depart from Nairobi, and also summoned his Kenyan counterpart in Mogadishu back home over what the Kenyan government at the time termed as provocation by Somalia. The two have since resumed their duties.
Some of the companies that may be involved are very well connected with the powerful people in European capitals, politically powerful people, not just financially. Of course, they're financially powerful, but also politically powerful people. So it looks as if it's an indirect aggression on Kenya.
This case has been given to the international arbitration, and if we seem to be aggressive, they might say that Kenya is interfering or even trying to influence the decision of the Maritime Court.
Although the ICJ is the principal judicial organ of the United Nations, Kenya's history with its sister criminal division, the ICC, where President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy William Ruto faced crimes against humanity charges, has largely clouded fears within political circles that the massive global commercial interests over the contentious space could infiltrate the ICJ. And as the battle for the ocean heads to Parliament, the dispute takes a political angle as the judges at The Hague prepare for the hearings from next month. Murami Mwangi, KTN News, in Nairobi.
So the controversy, the dispute continues between Kenya and Somalia. There has been, the National Assembly has been urging the government to deploy the troops to that contentious maritime border between Kenya and Somalia along in the Indian Ocean. We understand that, of course, on Wednesday this coming week, there will be that vote over the non-permanent slot in the United Nations Security Council that Kenya is seeking, to that slot. And this issue of Kenya and Somalia dispute is part of this. And of course, this is a very touchy issue. Maureen Mwangi will be covering for us the hearing by the United Nations, by the International Court of Justice at The Hague in the Netherlands next month. We are following this very closely for you. Dismas, let me begin with you. The National Assembly, Aden Duale, saying, or Parliament saying that we should deploy troops to the Indian Ocean to guard our territorial interests. In the light of this, is it a bit too strong a reaction?
It's a very strong reaction, and it's supposed to be the last option, because history tells us that when you have territorial issues and you deploy your forces, that is supposed to be the last option, and more often than not, it bleeds the two nations to death. But what Somalia is attempting to do today, it shouldn't even be classified as a dispute. It's an act of aggression. Because, we've got the Berlin Division of Africa, everything has been settled for ages. Even till 1992, when Said Barre left office, everything had been settled. So what Somalia is doing, of course, powered by global commercial interests, it's an act of an aggression that we should, all of us, stay alert. And at this stage, when President Kenyatta tells Kenyans to jump, nobody should be asking President Kenyatta, why are we jumping? We just need to ask him how high, because we cannot afford to have an inch of Kenya going anywhere. And in the unlikely event that ICJ rules that Somalia takes this land, it's going to be a disaster for Kenya, because now Kenya immediately is going to become a sea-locked country. And you can imagine that in future, if there's any international trade, you have to go to Somali authorities to seek the authorization that will start paying taxes to Somali authorities. That can't happen. That's number one. And then number two, there's some mischief that the first submission had encroached into the Tanzanian spaces, but they revised it and ignored the Tanzania space. So right now they're just zooming on Kenya. If the case is a success, everything you have in Mombasa will be almost a waste of time. Even a lapset will become a waste of time. It would even compromise the strength of our Kenyan Navy. Essentially, we just get lost. And in my view, what we should do, and Dwala suggested it, which is rare of him to give that very solid opinion, everything is supposed to be settled either at a bilateral manner or a multilateral. Because even when you go to court and ICJ rules in a particular manner, obviously, it's unlikely that President Kenyatta will go with that. So you'll have our forces going in. But again, there's a risk that is this going to be a proxy war? And from reports we are told that some of the companies which have already been given those rights by Somali are Norwegian companies. So one would have expected that the Norwegian ambassador in Kenya would have been taken into task to find out what is the Norwegian interest here, and also what is the Chinese interest. But all in all, as a nation, at this stage, it doesn't matter whether you like Punguza Mizigo or BBI, everybody should be rallying behind President Kenyatta. And the most important thing is to get a solution even before the ICJ makes a ruling, or even the idea of KDF going into war, in my view, is unacceptable. But if the president is going to be called to do that, let it be so. But finally, before we go to the ICJ, we need to ask ourselves who was in office at that particular time, especially from the legal division, who thought that instead of allowing the National Intelligence Service, instead of allowing the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to be proactive in this matter, they quickly decided that let's go to ICJ to get a legal solution to what is normally or otherwise a political problem.
All right. So, Mark, so many balls seem to be in the air in this. There is the ICJ hearing and ruling expected in The Hague next month. Kenya is seen or sees itself in the region as a big brother, obviously, to Somalia, has been helping Somalia in a lot of other things. There is this UNSC election coming up, which all this could have an effect on. There is ongoing elections in Jubaland. Jubaland and Somalia don't get along. There are reports that Kenya is meddling in that. Just how much of this could have an impact on what's going to happen in The Hague?
Well, all of it is going to have an impact in terms of what will happen at The Hague. And the reason why it will have an impact, and a lot of people may not know this, but the president of the ICJ is actually of Somali descent. And that should tell you a little bit of why Kenya is jittery. Kenya is jittery because Dismas has mentioned that this could be a proxy war. Well, I can confirm for you it is a proxy war, because if you go and check who's paying on behalf of Somalia to file that case, because Somalia doesn't have the money to file a case at the ICJ, if you check who's paying for Somalia, you'll realize it's some countries in the region of Norway that are paying for Somalia. If you look at who's bought the blocks, you'll see it's some people from the West. Then you look at the government, Farmajo's government. Farmajo himself is an American citizen. You've got his prime minister who's Norwegian. Well, has he finished? Until it has finished, he's still an American citizen. And as long as he's continuing to roll out the mandate of the Americans, then what does it matter? Then the prime minister, where is he from? He's Norwegian. You've got a foreign minister who's British. The entire cabinet is made up of these people who did not fight for Somalia, but they came back to take power, home guards, as Kipchumba would call them. Number two, you have to ask the question of how sinister is it that a country that has nearly 10 times the coastline of Kenya wants the tiny little space comparatively that Kenya has. And that should tell you this is a process where a finger is being put in our noses to see whether we nosebleed or not. Now, what is Kenya's course of action? Number one, I honestly believe that Kenya needs to deploy its military in that area so that the ICJ knows that they're not going to make a ruling that is detrimental to the country. We are not going to sit by and become a landlocked country. We're not going to sit by and watch Al-Shabaab ships be as close to the Lamu port that we are about to finish as they want it to be. We're not going to sit by and see that our sovereignty is being touched. And let's not forget, Kenya is the country which survived the Shifta War. What was the Shifta War? The Shifta War was about the Somalia government choosing to want to annex part of Kenya. This is the same ideology. It is simply that now they've found a space to exploit that.
Do you expect any kind of justice in all this? With all those
from a court that has Norwegians and Americans and is headed by a Somali? Come on. You understand? That's like saying, can the chicken go seek justice from the Council of Foxes? It can't work. Kenya would be best suited to either get IGAD or the East Africa Community or the African Union to discuss this issue with Somalia. And I'll tell you why that needs to be the case. Every border on the eastern side of Africa, the Indian Ocean side, is horizontal. Okay, our border with Tanzania is horizontal. Tanzania's border with Malawi, and going all the way down to South Africa, is horizontal. Why? Because there are certain islands that if Kenya did an equidistant line, as Somalia is proposing, we would be claiming parts of Pemba and Zanzibar. It is ridiculous to do so. So now, if that is going to happen, then the African Union needs to be scared, because Kenya's natural defense is to also draw an equidistant line with Tanzania, and then Tanzania the same. So you cannot adjust a history to suit Somalia, and its only benefit is very small, because it's gaining very small territory compared to its huge size, while Kenya is losing very large territory compared to our small size. The election in Jubaland, let me just say this for everybody to hear. Kenya should hit back as much as possible. Number one, that is the place where Al-Shabaab attacks us most in this side. Number two, it's the place where we should go and say we want a 48th county, and that should be our 48th county. Let's take the fight to them. Let's bring it as close as possible. After all, they're not good friends with Mogadishu, are they? Yeah, because sometimes you've got to play hard diplomacy to get it done. If the Russians can annex Crimea, or the Chinese with the South Asia Sea, as in, come on. There comes a point where we need to stand up and put our big boy pants on.
Rosalind, there's a lot of suggestion, not from Mark only, for Kenya to adopt a strong arm kind of tactics towards any issue that has to do with Somalia. What is your take on this?
I think at this stage, I don't think that is the way to go about it. And just to add to what my colleagues have said, remember the proposal, the motion that was sponsored in Parliament was a bipartisan motion. It was supported by both Duale on the majority side and John Mbadi on the minority side. But MPs raised some issues. They were saying that if we are to deploy the military to protect our territorial boundaries, then it should be the last resort. In fact, they were even saying, why don't you consult and see what the Intergovernmental Authority and the East African community says about it? And for them, they were still for the idea that we use diplomacy and just try, because this is not something that is starting now. This war has been there since 2014, but it was escalated after Somalia was accused of auctioning the oil blocks, which will start next year in January 2020. So for the MPs and the leaders, they believe that Somalia has been our neighbor. This is not the way to go. But Kenya has gone an extra mile and written to the UN seeking to have Al-Shabaab be classified as one of the global terrorist communities, groups. But some of the leaders that have actually served here, including the former ambassadors and all that, have objected to that because they're saying it is going to raise the issues of humanitarian crisis in the region. And remember, Kenya has been suffering the brunt of the humanitarian issues, because remember, if you look at the Dab and the other areas, they're actually filled with people from Somalia. So this move for them is not the right move. And again, when Kenya is now talking about peace and security in the Horn of Africa and also lobbying to be the representative of Africa at the United Nations Security Council, then all this, if you look at them, I think an aggressive approach is not the best for the country currently.
But it seems like Somalia is not being diplomatic at all.
Actually, Somalia is not being diplomatic because this has been a gentleman's agreement ever since.
Yes.
So to question why now they are now not agreeing to what had been there before, then it looks like they also have a hidden hand. But I think you don't fight fire with fire. We can still seek to talk to them. But remember what Mark was talking about, the proxy war.
Yes.
There is a feeling that Kenya is edging out the regional countries. It's acting as, quote unquote, the big brother, which some countries are not comfortable with. So I think even as Kenya seeks to partner with these regions, again, they need to look at them as equal partners and not the big brother.
All right.
Yeah.
Ben, just allow me 30 seconds. One of the reasons why it's difficult to negotiate with Farmajo is Farmajo has made this a re-election agenda for him. So he's got an election in 2020, and the reason why he's sticking to his guns is he wants to show his population that he can take on Kenya and win. So the reason he's unwilling to negotiate is not because he doesn't know what the right thing is, but because he's made this a campaign issue, a re-election issue for him. And for Kenya to win, we must address that issue.
But can
Kipchumba,
Somalia
very
face
quickly.
Kenya?
I think
Diplomacy or strong arm tactics?
Ben, from where I sit, I am a Kenyan and my business is this country. Whatever furthers that which is Kenyan is what we should go for. And that's why we have a constitution which its Article 2 talks about sovereignty. And it is that which we should guard with even our blood. And that is the reason why we gave Uhuru Kenyatta a sword after voting for him overwhelmingly, to guard this country. There comes a time when you cannot negotiate with your enemy. There comes a time when it must be known that you are there courtesy of strength, not courtesy of a negotiation. My advice is this on the two
Somalia
issues.
is not an enemy.
No. Anybody who advances interests. Anybody who advances interests that put our interests subservient to them become our enemy. Look at what has happened worldwide. And annexing that part, if that is what will happen, is not a big issue.
Right.
People who, public international law scholars will fault me for this, but I'm speaking as a political strategist purely on this one. One, my first step is this, on Jubaland. A quick one. We need Jubaland to remain as it is under Sheikh Mohammed Madobe. Why? That is a buffer zone for Al-Shabaab. We need it there to help us as a country so that before Al-Shabaab hits us direct, they have another people to deal with. so that we are not the first cushion of Al-Shabaab. This ban might sound funny, but it is strategic interest of this country. We have spent so much money hosting people from Somalia. We have spent so much money, which we continue, even as we fight for 10 billion for our counties, we are spending billions in Somalia funding KDF. For what reason? It is now time to cash on that.
Should we send troops to the Indian Ocean?
Yes.
Final question.
An emphatic yes for this reason. Anybody and anything that compromises our sovereignty should be dealt with the force that is required. For a reason. Look at what the founding father did with the shifters when there was that battle there.
Right.
He did it conclusively. Look at the problem we kept ourselves with Migingo. We do not know now whether Migingo is Kenya, Migingo is Uganda. It is because we took that negotiation approach which never ended. On this one, because I know the politics behind the 7 sisters in the oil and gas world,
yes,
and the politics that comes with the oil blocks.
We should go hard.
No, but the thing is, it is an economic battle, which negotiation should not help. And finally, even as we discuss about, we are not being lawless. What we are being is, look at what the Germans did with Austria some while back. Look at what the US did with Texas from wherever it was. Look at what China is doing with Tibet. Look at what all these other people are doing. The overarching theory is that you go after your interest.
Right.
If we allow people to come up and down, we will never have anything as a country.
It is a story we are continuing to keep an eye on for you. Of course, the hearing of that at the ICJ in The Hague, Netherlands, will be covering that for you. And of course, that upcoming vote for the slot of the UN Security Council. Let's take a quick commercial break here on Inside Politics. When we come back, we are back for